Welcome to What the Mom podcast. You are listening to Doulas Petra
and Jacqueline.
Motherhood can be isolating and hard.
We are two doulas that want to provide a safe place to talk about all things mom.
From pregnancy to birth to postpartum to parenting.
Join us as we have real conversations about real life.
Today, we're going to be talking about our birth stories.
Super exciting. It's my favorite.
Yes, me too. I love hearing birth stories. So we thought we'd start off just sharing our own with everyone. Our stories are very similar in some ways, but yet very different. I'll start by sharing with my first. He is now 7. And when I was pregnant with him, my pregnancy was very good. I didn't have morning sickness. I hardly had any problems at all. It wasn't until the very end that I had increased blood pressure. And I think, in retrospect, it was because we were actually moving when I was 35 or 36 weeks pregnant.
Definitely. It could add some stress.
So I was wanting to birth center birth, and I had a midwife. But I wasn't allowed to because of my high blood pressure, so I ended up going to the hospital because I was considered high risk then. At the last few weeks, I was put on bed rest, although I did not fully comply. I tried. I'm a busybody. They were checking my blood pressure daily. I had a home care nurse come and check me. They were having me check my urine, checking all my levels. They were all within normal ranges, but they were going up. So we were considering induction just because if my levels went past those normal levels. I wasn't allowed to have a midwife as my main provider anymore.
That's insane to me, but yeah.
Yeah. So she'd be a doula, which would still be nice, but then I'd have a doctor that I didn't know, and I didn't want that. So
totally.
Then it was literally the day before we actually planned an induction. I woke up in the morning and my waters broke.
That's awesome.
Which was really nice because then it just happened on its own. But I didn't know because I thought I peed. As a lot of women do when it just leaks.
Yeah, I had that too.
Yeah. I think it's actually more common than the movie gush of water.
I have heard that. It's I think something 5% of women. It's super low.
Yeah. Not even very many women have their waters break before contractions either.
Nope.
Which is crazy. So anyone who hasn't had a baby yet, keep that in mind. That's not always your first sign. Then I thought I peed. I went to the washroom. And then I was like, oh, okay, well, that was weird. I went all this pregnancy without peeing my pants, and now I peed. That sucks. Then I went back to bed. And 5-10 minutes later, I peed again. And I was like, oh, what's wrong with my bladder? I went up, got to use the washroom. I had that happen 4 times. And I was finally like, oh, maybe I'm actually going to have a baby. Very exciting. So I called the midwife. And she told me to put on a pad and go for a walk. She said, if you can't go for a walk, then just do some movement. You can do yoga exercise style of cat-cow and then
walking the stairs.
Yeah, anything that moves the baby's head around. So I lived on a really beautiful lake, Beaumaris Lake in Edmonton. So it was a nice big long walk. So I thought, okay, I'll just go for a walk. So I did that, and I think I made it 3 minutes, and my pad was soaked. My waters had broken. So then I texted my husband who was at work, and I said, hey, just, you don't have to come home yet, but my waters broke. He got so excited. I think he came home in an hour.
Yeah, sounds about right.
But my waters broke at 8:30, and I hadn't had contractions yet. So then we just kind of hung out at home, and I tried moving, going on the exercise ball, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And then I started to have contractions, I don't know, maybe 11:30, a few hours after my waters broke. But they were really mild. And I have a very high pain tolerance.
You do. I can
Yeah.
attest to that.
Yeah. And it's my first baby, so we weren't really sure like if I was further along or not. So my husband said, "Oh, let's go to the hospital." So we went. And that was around 4:30 when we went. By the time we got checked in, the midwife met us there. She checked me. I think that would have been like 5:30, and she said I was only dilated to a 4. So I was in labor, but technically they don't admit you until 5 centimeters. But because I had high blood pressure, yeah, it's crazy.
I thought it was 3. It's not, really.
Well, I don't know. This is what I was told then, though. Maybe it differs.
Maybe it's changed. Okay.
Hospital, or maybe it's just changed since then.
Yeah.
But she told me 5, and I was 4. But because I had high blood pressure, I could stay for monitoring. So I'm like, well, if I'm not close anyways, I'm not driving all the way home. So we stayed. We got comfortable. We had brought all of our stuff with us because I had everything packed. And I had done hypnobirthing tracks during my pregnancy.
Yeah.
But I actually forgot about it at the beginning. So we just had like regular music playing. And I was doing okay coping with them. I think I started like active labor where it was like really intense. I had to breathe through them and stop around 7:30. So 11 hours after my waters broke. And then I was coping through them using different positioning because I didn't want to have medication if I didn't have to. And I was on the bed. I was hanging off the bed. I was on the toilet. That's always the worst, but it brings on the contractions harder.
The worst.
Yes. And I was in the shower. But then at one point, I don't remember what time, maybe 11:30, the midwife asked if I wanted her to check my dilation again. So I said yes. And I found out I was 7 centimeters dilated. So in retrospect, that was really good. I was a first-time mom. But in the moment, I freaked out. Mentally, it was so hard on me. And I was like, I have to get to 10, and I've been going this long, and I'm only at a 7. I don't know what I'm going to do. So then I'm freaking out, and she's trying to calm me down. And then she said to me, well, if you want, we can give you Pitocin, but sometimes that can make it go like super crazy, and it's really hard to do without meds. And I said, well, if that's going to get me there faster, I'm going to do it. My husband tried to talk me out of it, but I was too freaked out. So I got Pitocin.
First time babies.
Yes. But because I had high blood pressure, this is the kicker, I couldn't get Pitocin without getting an epidural. So I didn't get an epidural necessarily because I just wanted one. It was because I had to get the Pitocin. So I said, okay, sure, I'll do it. And this was not originally something that I wanted. So my plans completely changed, as a lot of people can attest to.
Yep.
And then it was probably close to midnight. I did have this. I did get the epidural. But the doctor that came in, the anesthesiologist, was horrible with bed manners. He was previously a drill sergeant in the Army. He was disrespectful to the nurse that was in the room in front of us. He was disrespectful to my husband and my parents and the birth photographer who were in the room with me, because he just wanted like everyone out of the way. And it made me feel really uncomfortable, but I'm in labor, so I'm not saying anything. I did say something to the nurses afterwards, though. So that wasn't fun. And I had to sit on the edge of the bed to get the epidural. And until this point, I was okay managing my contractions. But this was actually painful. Having to sit in that position, it hurt. Like,
I've heard it's horrible.
It was really bad. And I was already really dilated too, which probably didn't help. So that actually hurt getting that. But once it was in, I didn't have any of that pain anymore. But I had one little spot on my left lower part of my abdomen that did not freeze. And I could feel like a pinch. And so I could feel when I was having contractions, which was kind of cool because then it wasn't like the full thing.
Yeah.
But then so it would have been 12, 1, 2, 3 more hours. So I was able to sleep on and off a little bit. And I had 3 more hours until my body was ready to actually push the baby out and I was fully dilated. And then I had 2 hours of pushing, which is awful. So I couldn't feel anything except this little pinch. So every time I feel a pinch, I push. And then it was just taking so long. And I remember the doctor came in and he goes, well, she's been pushing for too long. I think we need to prep her for a C-section. And the midwife advocated for me, thankfully. And she said, no, the baby's almost here. We're good. We'll let you know if we're ready for that. So thankfully, they didn't even talk to me about it because that was one of the things I did not want to do unless there was an emergency.
Yeah.
And that wasn't at that point. So then I ended up, they put the bar up on the bed. I ended up going like in a squatting position, which was hard with an epidural, but I wanted gravity to help, and it did help. The gravity helped bring baby down further. And then he was born at 5:28 in the morning.
Wow.
And he was really, really tiny. He only weighed 6 pounds, 4 ounces. And he was like completely white. He was born at 38 weeks and 5 days.
Oh, so it was a little early.
A little bit, yeah. But he was just the cutest thing ever. He was so tiny. My smallest of all my babies. And he breastfed like a champ right away. So that was, it wasn't like a bad experience, but it definitely wasn't what I pictured in my mind. So then my second baby, when I was pregnant, I said, you know what? I am going to have a home birth. That's what I wanted all along. I'm going to do it. So I did. I had a midwife again, the same one with a student midwife as well. She was really great. And we did the home birth. We lived in a small apartment, but we still did it. It was really nice. Labor was good. I spent a lot of the time in the bathtub using water because we had a big tub. But I could feel my body just needed to move. And I wasn't, like, baby wasn't going to come. So then I moved to my bed. And maybe half an hour later, my body was ready to push. And my waters, I guess I didn't say, my waters did break with her too. But it was at 5:30 p.m. And then within an hour and a half, my contractions started. So it was really quickly.
Wow.
And then pushing for her, I was just like excited to get her out. And I made a really big mistake. And I like pushed as hard as I could, which is a horrible thing to do. When the head is like starting to emerge, yeah, don't do that. So then I pushed as hard as I could, and then the midwife was like, no, don't do that. And I did hire a doula with the second baby because I wanted someone to advocate for me to stay at home. And she also was the same thing, like, no, don't push. But I tore really badly, unfortunately, because of it. My first, I didn't at all. So then the rest of it kind of hurt a lot because I made that stupid mistake. But it was only 6 minutes, and she was out. And I was on all fours on the bed, and she came out, and I turned over, and she was purple. She was very, very purple, and she didn't breathe right away.
I remember you saying that, yeah.
It was, for everyone else, it was really freaky. I didn't actually have a moment of thinking in my mind, my baby is dead. Like, I didn't think that. I felt at peace. Like, I knew she was going to breathe. I felt, as a Christian, I had prayed the whole time, right? And I just felt that the Holy Spirit was with me, and like he just told me, like, you know what, it's going to be okay. And I just touched my baby. I touched her feet because she was between my legs, and I touched her feet, and I said, hey, honey, it's okay. Mommy's here. You can take a breath now. And I just talked to her and gently touched her. And the midwives waited for a minute, and she didn't breathe. And they looked at each other, and they knew they had to do something. So right away, my doula called the ambulance, and my husband, Tom, freaked out. He couldn't handle it. And he ran out of the bedroom, and my parents were there for the birth. My dad was just out in the living room. So he ran out to my dad. And in the end, my dad was there as a support to my husband. And he went to my dad to go tell him what happened. And my dad prayed with him right away too. And then the midwives put the mask on the baby, and then the other one suctioned her. and then they gave her some air, and I just kept touching her and just talking to her. My mom was at my side too, and
Wow.
I can't remember how long they said it was, maybe like 2 minutes, and then she finally took a breath, and right
Wow.
away the purple disappeared, and she was pink. And then she cried loud.
She didn't stop.
Yeah, that was crazy. So then everyone was like, oh, like there was like tears, everyone's hugging and crying, and like it was a big thing. And I'm just sitting there like, yeah, I knew she was gonna break. My mom tells me like it was really freaky. She's like, I don't know what was going through your mind, but that was freaky how calm you were. But I just knew. So then I picked up the baby and I put her on my chest right away. And then we also had a birth photographer at this birth. So she was taking pictures during it, the whole entire thing as well. And then I started bleeding and I hemorrhaged. So this beautiful home birth that I had planned did not go as planned at all. And I started bleeding. Baby was okay now at this point, and I started bleeding. So the midwives gave me a shot of oxytocin. I kept bleeding. They gave me a second shot in the other leg of oxytocin, and I kept bleeding. And the paramedics arrived right around that time. They came for the baby. Turns out they needed to come for mom. So
Yeah.
then I started, I guess, turning really white. My husband goes, "Oh, Petra, you're really white. Oh no, are you okay?" And I was just feeling a little bit lightheaded, but I didn't notice anything right away. I'm just holding my baby. And then they had me change into something else. I had bought a specific gown, actually, that I could take instead of wearing the hospital gown. So I put that on. Tom got to hold the baby while I did that. They woke up our son, Ondor, because he was sleeping, because she was born at 12 something in the morning. So he can quickly meet his sister before we left. Then I went onto a stretcher, and I remember as we're leaving, I'm thinking about the things that I did not put in my emergency hospital bag. I'm like, oh, Tom, can you go grab my charger? Oh, and maybe that coconut water from the fridge. And I'm just like calmly stating all these things. And he's like, oh, okay. And he's like going and grabbing. So then he came with me, and my parents were able to stay with their son. And we went in the ambulance. And I remember in the ambulance, I'm laying on the stretcher holding the baby, and my husband's talking to the paramedic, and I'm starting to feel really nauseous. And that's from really, really low blood pressure. And I'm like, oh, I think I'm going to puke. Do you have something I could puke into? And they're like, oh, no. So they're checking my blood pressure, and it's going down. It's going down. And I almost fainted right as we got to the hospital. And I don't really remember much of getting into the hospital. But then when we were in the hospital, I remember a nurse having to take blood clots out, and it hurt a lot.
I had the same thing.
Oh, it was horrible.
Awful.
She actually had to stick her hand in and do it. And then she had to stitch me up because I was stupid and pushed really hard. So that was not such a great experience. But the baby, she slept, I think, for 3 hours, and she wouldn't breastfeed. And I had a lot of push, like, you need to put her on the breast. And she wasn't ready. So I was like, she'll eat when she's ready. And sure enough, she was. She ate for like 2 hours. And then we both healed really well. It was good. We got pregnant with our third. And again, I was like, I want to have a home birth. I don't want to go to the hospital. I did not like being there for those reasons. Like, I'm not going to have any of these problems. I'm going to pray for it. And during my pregnancy, my third baby now, she had really, really high heart rate at one point. They were worried she actually had a heart problem. And I can't remember the name of it now, but basically it's an irregular heart rhythm that if it gets too high at any point for too long, they can actually get liquid, the amniotic fluid, into their heart. So that's why they were worried. So then they sent me for ultrasounds, and I was doing non-stress tests, and it was just stressing me out. And the midwife wanted me to sign something if I was going to have a birth at home because her recommendation was going to the hospital. So I'm like, oh, this really sucks. I just wanted this beautiful home birth. And then I had early labor for a really long time, like a week. And
I remember that.
I remember talking to you, and you had something similar. And then I ended up having that.
It was kind of something that threw you off, though, I remember, because you're like, this is so different from my last. And,
yeah, because the other two, my waters broke and then contractions started. Yeah.
a wild
So
card, number 3.
Totally. So then this one, I'm just having these contractions, like they're on and off, and they're just going. I'm like, well, they're actually kind of intense. They're just not regular. So they were dilating me slowly over time.
Yeah.
And then when it finally started, my waters did not break right away. It was just active labor. And it was in the evening. I was watching a movie with my husband, and they were getting a lot more intense, and they felt a lot lower than the other ones did. And I was like, oh, actually, now I remember this feeling.
Yeah.
So then I was like, okay, I think we should probably go try to get some sleep because labor's starting. But then we can't sleep. Like, I'm already in labor, and I'm like, I'm not going to sleep. So we make the bed, and I get the birth ball. We get everything ready. And then, Jacqueline, you were going to be my doula.
I was going to come over.
Yeah. And I told you, and what was that, like midnight or 12:30 or something?
I think it was like 1:30.
Yeah, maybe a little later.
It was the middle of the night. Yeah.
And then we were planning for it. The midwife showed up, and as she was checking the baby's heart rate, it was really high again. And she's like, well, I would recommend you maybe transfer, because if the baby's heart rate stays really high, this could be dangerous. And then I'm like, oh, great. Like, I could stay if I really want to, but if something happened, I'd be so upset at myself for doing that. I don't know. So then I said, you know what? I'm just going to transfer. But keep in mind, this is in the middle of the COVID pandemic in 2020. So there's a lot of restrictions happening. And I'm like, oh, I don't know if I want this, but I'd rather just be safe than sorry. So we tell everyone, and we're like, okay, we're going to go. So because I was still early enough in labor and I knew, I just took my time gathering everything that we needed. My mom was already there again, so she just stayed with the kids. And we actually switched vehicles with her so that she had the car seats to go back to her house. And her vehicle is a lot bumpier than ours. So that was fun too, as we're driving to the hospital. I hadn't experienced being that far along in the vehicle yet. So I'm like, whew, this is a little intense. And then we got to the hospital, and they had the check-in people. And the check-in people are doing like their checklist for COVID and whatever. Like, have you experienced any of the following symptoms? Have you been out of the country? Blah, blah, blah. And my husband's like, my wife's in labor. The answers are no, 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 and no. They're like, okay. And then they go to hand us some masks. And I just looked at them and I said, I'm not wearing that. And they're like, oh, you have to. It's hospital policy. And I said, I am in labor. I am trying to breathe through these contractions. I am not going to put a mask on my face when I'm breathing through the contractions. And then they did not know how to respond. I mean, I guess some people can, but I did not think I'd be able to. So I just said, sorry, I can't. And then they're like frantically looking around, and my husband's like, someone get my wife a wheelchair. She's having a baby. I'm like, I'm still walking. I'm fine. He's like, no, we're going to get you a wheelchair. So he found me a wheelchair. Then the nurses finally came over to me, and they bring me a face shield. I'm like, well, can you wear this? And I said, yeah, fine. I don't think a shield's going to do anything by itself, but I'll do it. At least I can breathe, right?
Yeah.
So then they wheeled me to the room, and there was rules that you can only have, or you could have 2 visitors, but not at the same time. Because apparently COVID it can only be there if they're at the same time, not if they switch and take turns. So, because that made sense. And then my mom couldn't be in the room with us. I couldn't have the birth photographer with us in there. I couldn't have a doula in there. So I'm like, well, I guess this is going to be a new experience. So my husband came with me, and it was really nice. It was nice and intimate, and it was quiet, but it was very different. And it was, he had a big role in this time because he didn't have the extra supports. So I was only relying on him to be there for me. And the midwife kind of came in and out. She gave us a lot of space, and I labored in all different types of positions again. And then at one point I went onto the toilet because I thought I had to poo, which I did. But then after I pooped, I had this intense contraction and it felt different. And I knew this meant my body was trying to push out the baby because I wanted my body to do it this time because I didn't want to tear. So then it just like contraction, like started pushing this baby. And I was like, I reached down and I could feel the top of a head. And I was like, okay, yes, that is what I thought it was. And I'm like squeezing my husband's hand so tight that he thought it was going to break. And I was like, oh, and I can't get off the toilet now because it's so intense. And he's like, do you want to go to the bed? I'm like, I don't think I can. And they're getting closer together. And then all of a sudden I had a break and I said, okay, I need to get to the bed. So he helped me get over to the bed. And I had a couple contractions laying down because I was just so tired at this point. But then I kind of had stalled at this point and it didn't seem like they were progressing. And so the midwife said, well, if you'd like, I can tell you're really tired. I can break your waters because that usually intensifies it really fast since you're so close anyways. And I said, okay, let's do that because they hadn't broken yet. So she got out the thing or whatever they use. And then she did it and they broke all over and the baby had pooped. So we had meconium in the fluid, which we think is why the heart rate was really high. So then it did intensify and it was like, baby was pretty much almost there after this. And then she gave me a peanut ball to put between my legs, which I'd heard intensifies it a lot. And I was right. Everything I heard was right. Just like the toilet, it's a similar position. And they got crazy, crazy intense. And then I could feel the baby was starting to come out more. And then my body kept pushing the baby. And then I basically kicked the peanut ball away. I went on all fours and I started just like the baby just started coming out. I wasn't pushing. But then the heart rate got low and the midwife said, okay, baby's heart rate just dropped a lot. Do you think you can push with this next contraction? And I said, okay. So I pushed with it. The baby came flying out. I could not catch her. The midwife could not catch her. She flew down onto the bed. My husband's like, oh. So that was a little crazy. And then I picked her up and I held her and she was kind of gurgly and I went to go like turn her over. And right away we had these nurses come in and the midwife says, we need to cut the cord. And I'm like, oh, okay. They cut the baby's cord and they carried my baby to a table on the other side of the room. And this was because of the meconium.
Yeah.
So they wanted to suction it out. And I'm sitting there like worried about hemorrhaging because of the stress now of my baby being taken from me. Like not taken, but like not around.
Yeah.
Even though my husband's there, like I just want to hold his baby. I just pushed out and I'm like, my baby, I want my baby. Where's my baby? And everyone's like, it's okay. She's fine. She's going to come see you right away. And I'm like, but I want my
baby.
Yeah. So then they suctioned her and then they were able to bring her back to me. And then again, she latched pretty quickly and it was really good. My fourth baby, it's a lot simpler story. I prayed the entire pregnancy. I prayed that we'd be able to have this beautiful home birth, no transferring, no problems with the heart rate, no problems with breathing, no problems with hemorrhaging, like none of that. But I just want this beautiful home birth. And then Jacqueline had started her doula schooling and I said, well, this is the perfect opportunity. Come to my birth. And since you didn't get to do the last one, we thought this is perfect.
Yeah.
And we had prayed about it and I was approaching my due date. My husband was working out of town. It was hard to know like when he should be home. He came home, like a week before? Like I was 39 weeks?
I think so, yeah.
And he had been home like a whole week already. And my due date came and went. Baby was not coming. She was very, very low, but she was not coming. And I'm like, oh, this really sucks. Like, I just want to have this baby and I don't want my husband to go back to work. So a few more days pass. She's still not there. So then I was 6 days past my due date. And my parents came over to watch the kids for a little bit so we can rest. And they made us some food. And I said, well, I'm going to go maybe get a membrane sweep or something. I'll ask my midwife. So I asked her, and then she said, yeah, I'll meet you at the clinic. And then when we got to the clinic, she said, if you want, I can just break your waters. You're already past your due date. If your baby's really low, they might start contractions. You just have to know if it's been broken for so long without contractions, you would have to go to the hospital. And I said, yeah, let's do this. I prayed for a home birth. I'll be fine. So we did. We broke the waters, and that was, what, 5:30 p.m.?
5 something, yeah.
We went home, and by the time I put my kids to bed at like 8 o'clock, I was having a contraction. And it was pretty intense because they were like mild before that. And I finished putting the kids to bed. I go downstairs and I said, my husband and my dad were down there, and I said, hey, I'm having a baby. And I told my parents, I'm like, okay, I guess you guys are going to sleep here tonight. And they're like, yeah, you're having a baby. So then the contraction just kept coming. My dad helped with trying to time them, and I was definitely in active labor. Like they were getting closer and closer. I don't know what time we called the midwife, but I told my husband, and I think I told you too, Jacqueline, that I didn't want to call her
last minute.
Until we knew, like, I'm only going to the hospital with an emergency. I can't make that choice.
Yeah.
So that's what we did. And then by the time you showed up, I was already laying on my bed listening.
It was about 9 o'clock, yeah.
Yeah. I was listening to my Christian hypnobirthing tracks, which were amazing because it helped me just relax during my contractions. And then, like, I just closed my eyes and I focused on my breathing, and they were so good. And then I felt like it was very, very intense. And that's when I said, I think we should maybe fill up the birth pool now because I'd like to have some water. And then I just remember like hearing the voices of everyone talking, like filling up the pool. Was it filled up before you came, or did you help fill it up?
We helped fill it up. Yeah, I did. Yeah.
That's what I thought. And then I remember everyone was filling it up, and then I had to like interject with a comment because they're like something about temperature. I'm like, oh, just make it really hot. You can always add cold water. Like talking between my contractions. And then when I was able to get in the pool, oh, that felt so good. Water is such a good pain reliever. I couldn't believe it. I was like, wow, this is so good.
It's so good.
Yeah. So the birth pool was right beside my bed, which was nice in my bedroom. And then I pretty much just labored in the pool most of the time and listening to my Christian hypnobirthing tracks. And I went up to go pee in the toilet. And as soon as I sat down, like, no, I'm not ready for this yet. Like feeling the change of contractions.
I'll never forget that.
I was not ready. It's true.
Like, I'm kind of happy it's not me.
Yeah, pretty much. Because you just recently had your last baby before that.
Yeah.
And then I think I got up to pee one last time, and they did intensify. And then I was just letting my body do its thing. And I was like reaching down, feeling my cervix dilate on my own, which was so cool. And then I felt like a whole bunch of head, like I knew, like I was getting close. And then my contraction changed, and it like, I don't know how to even describe it, but like it feels different, and I could feel like pushing down the baby on its own. And then I remember saying, guys, where's Tom? I think I'm gonna have the baby soon, so someone needs to get him and bring him here. And then I remember someone saying, oh, he's just in the washroom right now. And I was like, okay, well, someone tell him it's not an emergency, but he might want to finish up soon. So then I just remember my body was just like pushing on its own. And then I started like on my back, leaning on the pool. And then I felt my body just needed to move. So I ended up on all fours yet again. Every birth, I kind of did that. And I literally just pushed this baby out. And the shoulders, the baby stopped with the face out, and the shoulders were still in. My other ones just came flying out. So this was new to me. So I'm waiting for a contraction. I have this long break, and I'm like feeling the face on this baby, and I'm like, oh my goodness, I can feel the face. I can feel the baby's face. And then I feel the baby moving, and I'm like, oh, the baby just moved. And the midwife's like, oh, that's okay. The baby's probably just moving its shoulders. And then she said, well, the baby's been in the water for a couple minutes already. Do you mind if I just kind of help bring the shoulders out a bit? And I said, okay. So then she reached into the tub, and she kind of just like turned the baby slightly. And then I had this huge contraction, and I pushed with that contraction, and the baby came out, and I just picked up the baby and I put her on my chest. And it was like the most amazing thing ever. I'm like, wow, I did it without like screaming and yelling. And Jacqueline got a really cool video of it all. It was really
I
nice.
totally did. So cool.
Yeah.
You know what? Everyone's birth story is so different, and you really can't predict what it's going to be like. You have to just be okay if it changes. My first, well, he's 9 now, so gosh, feels like forever ago to even remember all of it. But I remember I was at my girlfriend's house, actually. I was at my friend Cassandra's, and I was going to babysit her son the next day. And I think he was like 4 days early. So I was like probably like 39 weeks, 30, just over 39 weeks. And I went to sleep and I woke up and there was like blood and I was like, bah, and I'm like freaking out. And I remember waking my friend up and I'm like, oh my goodness, there's like blood. And she's like, no, that's totally fine. Like, don't worry about it. That's super normal. That just means like your cervix is softening and it's a good thing. And I'm like, okay. And she's like, what I would do is just go back to bed. And I'm like, I'm not going back to bed. I'm going home. So I remember trying to call Keith, and he has this thing where if you press, you can't just call, like you have to press it like multiple times. And I didn't realize that, so he wasn't getting my calls. So I race home. I start to have contractions on my way home, and I'm like, I'm thinking I could have a baby any minute, right? Because I have no idea. Like, I literally have no idea how bad contractions have to get. It's so funny, looking back. So I remember getting home. I think it was like, I don't know, like 3 in the morning, 4 in the morning. I remember getting home and I walk in the door and my husband almost karate chopped me down the stairs because he was terrified. He didn't know that I was coming home.
Oh.
He's like, I didn't know, I didn't expect you to come. I'm like, yeah, I didn't either. But then I started having contractions and I'm like, this could go really fast and I have no clue. And it's funny because I just never thought like, oh, I'd be in labor forever, right? And so I remember going upstairs and just like, we couldn't sleep. We were too excited. Obviously, like first baby. And then I remember going to sleep for a little bit and then the morning came and I'm like, I wonder how dilated I am. And I remember calling, oh wait, never mind. I am such a newbie. I actually called my midwife in the middle of the night and I felt so bad because I was like, there's blood. And she's like, oh, Jacqueline, that's super normal. Like, just don't worry about it. And I'm like, oh, okay. And she's like, yeah, trust me. Like, the baby could come tomorrow or in a week. Like, you have no idea. And I felt so bad because, like, knowing that, I would never do that ever again because, like, midwives, they're up all night, right? Like, when there's a birth or whatever, when there's not a birth, they're sleeping. And so I felt so bad. I was totally a newbie. So anyways, I called her the next morning because I was like, I wonder how dilated I am. And she told me she'd come check on me the next morning and see what my progress was. So she checked me and she's like, you're not going to like this. And I'm like, what? And she's like, you're 1 centimeter. And I'm like, what? He's like, okay. So then, like, what are we supposed to do? Like, now what, right? And so I remember she just said, like, honestly, you could still be pregnant for a week. And I'm like, what? So then she said, like, keep her posted. But she said Jenny, which was my main midwife, she was at a seminar or something for midwives. And so she was like, what did she say? She's like, I'll come by later and I'll check you. And I said, okay. And I had annoying contractions all day long. And I thought for sure I'd be like, 4 centimeters. I was 1.5. I was like basically 1. And I was like, oh my gosh. So that was Saturday night. And then Sunday came and I still was pregnant and I had contractions all day Sunday. And the midwife did come to check me that night because she thought maybe I'd be more dilated. And then she checked and I was like 2. And I was so frustrated. And I'm like, why am I not like dilating? What is going on? It's so funny though, because my mom, she would take forever to dilate. And apparently you're a lot like your mom. So I was like, well, that's great. Thanks, Mom.
Yeah.
So then the midwife checked me and she's like, she just said to Keith, she's like, you just need to like totally relax her, like go give her a massage, like do whatever you can to relax her because it's going to be a long night. And so, yeah, we went to sleep. I actually was able to sleep that night. Like I felt peace and I was able to sleep the whole night.
Good.
And then the next morning comes and she comes over because she's like, okay, like you've been in labor for a long time. Like we should like figure this out for you. And she goes, so what I want you to do is I'm going to check you. And then if you're further along, we'll figure something out. So anyways, she checks me and I'm not much dilated, like maybe 2.5 or something. And I can't remember, like between 2 and 3. But then she's like, Jacqueline, when I checked you, I noticed that there was like, it felt like it was like swollen or whatever. And it felt like a bump. And I'm like, what? And she's like, yeah, like if it's his bum, then I can't deliver the baby at home. Like we have to go to the hospital.
Oh, wow.
So then I'm freaking out. I'm like, that's not my birth plan and blah, 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 blah. Anyway, she goes, what I want to do, because I want you to have the best outcome, is I want to go to the birth center and I want to do an ultrasound just to make sure that it's Ben's head. And so my midwife, she's like, so Keith, I want you to pack like a hospital bag and then like meet me at the birth center. So that's what we did. We went to the birth center. I was having contractions, but they were not that bad. They were annoying, like, you know, like beginning stages, but they weren't horrible. And so we get to the birth center, and then it's funny because as soon as I'm laying down and she's trying to do the ultrasound, I am like getting intense contractions. And it's so uncomfortable. And I like have to move around. I have to get up and move and, you know. And so then she does the ultrasound and she goes, okay, like I can see that it's his head. It's just really swollen. So she figures it's because he was low for a really long time being engaged. And so anyways, she's like, but we're going to have your baby today. We're going to, you know, help put you out of your misery kind of thing. So I was like, okay. And she's like, yeah, so we're definitely going to have a baby today. And she's like, so what we're going to do is we're going to stretch you into active labor. And I'm like, does that hurt? Looking back, like obviously, duh, it's going to hurt. So they stretched me into active labor. And I swear to you, it was like a 1 to a 20 in like in seconds. It was insane. Wow. And I remember being like, I don't want to do this. I can't do this. I don't want to do this. I can't do this. And Keith's like, Jacqueline, you can do it. We're going to have Ben at home. Like, we're going to do this. We're going to get home and we're going to have him in the water just like you wanted. And I'm like, no, I can't do this. And he's like, no, you said you want to do this. So I'm like, okay. So we go home and I remember laboring in the tub and I was just like in so much pain. Especially like you're not knowing what you're going to have happen, you know, your first and stuff. So I'm in the tub and my contractions start to get a little bit more intense and I just like cannot handle it anymore. And so I'm like, call the midwife. And he's like, okay, fine, I'll call the midwife. So he calls the midwife and Jenny was amazing. She's like, I just need to go do something and then I'll be right over. I think it was like, I don't know, like 11:30 or something like that in the morning, like right before noon. And so she's like, yeah, I'll come over. Don't worry about it. So she gets there and she's like, do you want me to give you a massage? Like she was amazing. Having a midwife is amazing.
I agree.
And so she gave me a massage, and it like, I don't know, it helped to relax me. But then she's like, now I want you to do the stairs. And I'm like curse the stairs, like horrible when you're in pain. So then she had me doing the stairs, and then they got more intense. So I was like, that's good. It's going to be better, you know? So then I want to say, I don't know, it was like he was born at 4:56 or something, okay? Just before dinner time.
Yeah.
And so my active labor with him was about 5.5 hours. So it was pretty decent. It wasn't horrible. So I remember them getting really intense, and then she just kept checking me, and then she's like, there's just a little bit left. And, you know, like I dilated quite fast after that. And then I remember being in the pool, and I'm like, oh my gosh, like, holy crap, this is really happening. Like, I'm going to have a baby. And I remember being in the water, and Keith was right behind me, right in front of me, or like behind me, because I was on all fours. And Noreen Walker, she's a legend. Oh my goodness, I love her. She was there, and she was like holding my hands and like coaching me. And she's like, you can do this. You're going to meet your baby so soon. She was just such an amazing support. And then Jenny was down by my legs. And yeah, she's just like, you're just going to have to push. And so it's just so crazy how like our bodies can do that. But yeah, I just started pushing. And he was out, I want to say, I think I pushed for maybe 10 minutes. I think 10 or 15 minutes. And then he came out, and they put him on my chest, and then you just like ugly cry, and like,
Aww.
oh my gosh, it was so cool. Like I would say, like my experience was overall really good. It's just like, obviously it hurt. Like I knew it was gonna hurt. I did hemorrhage a little. No, did I hemorrhage was bad? A little bit, very little, not a lot at all. And I remember, I'll never forget it. My sister just got engaged in Bosnia, and she switched her flights to fly into Edmonton instead of Victoria. And yeah, as soon as I was coming out of the pool, and they were covering me up and stuff. Okay, yes, I did hemorrhage. I remember. I'm like, did I hemorrhage? Yes, I did. So I remember hemorrhaging, and I lost some blood. And so they gave me like an IV, and they hooked it up on the thing. And she just gave me a shot in my leg. It was only one shot though.
Yeah.
With my second, I had 3. I'll explain that. So then I remember getting out of the pool, and then I was just like butt naked, and I was just like nursing, and my sister walked in. It was a cool experience. And yeah, then she was an auntie, and then it was so cool. It was, honestly, it was exactly what I wanted. I don't think I could have asked for anything else. Like looking back, like the early labor, that's super normal. And yeah, I can't really complain with that. Like it was pretty good. I got pregnant with my second when my son was 1. I had just found out right after his first birthday I was pregnant. So then honestly, like his pregnancy and everything was so good too. It was so awesome. I did have a low-lying placenta, but it did end up moving, so I was very grateful for that. Also, before, when I was about 20 weeks along with Ben, I found out I had a low-lying placenta, and they actually told me that I might have to have a C-section. And I actually put myself on bed rest for like, I don't know, I think it was like 4 months or something. And I just like was like, I don't want a C-section. Anyways, I did not have a C-section, and I'm so grateful. But I don't know what it is with my placentas. As soon as they implant in the uterine wall, like they just are low, because it happened with Sophie as well. It moved around like the 30-week mark, same kind of thing with Ben.
That's common for it to move though.
It's super common because it gets like, it just like, as your body grows and your belly grows, right, the baby pushes it. But they make it sound like, oh my goodness, like there's a really high chance you're going to need a C-section. And
Yeah.
that was freaky. Like you said, like that was my worst nightmare too. So yeah, with Sophie, I had a really good pregnancy. Everything was really good. The placenta moved out of the way. With her birth story, it's funny because my mom, she came to visit me. I'll never forget this. And for weeks, Sophie was engaged and ready to go. And my mom came to visit, and then she swam up. And I remember being like, no.
Yeah. No
And
kidding.
my mom's like, are you kidding me? My mom, she flew in on December 24th, 23rd, it was the 23rd. And she had booked her flights to go back on January 1st. I'm like, first of all, who flies on January 1st? And two, that's like my due date was like December 29th. And I'm like, Mom, are you kidding me? And so, anyways, she came to my appointment, which was so cool. Also, because my mom was going to have me at home, but then there was this big thing that happened. My dad had this dream, and in the dream, my mom died. And it was so crazy, and everything in the dream happened. And so my mom was going to have me at home, but she ended up not being able to. So it was super cool because I got to have a home birth, and my mom got to be there for my first daughter.
Yeah.
So it was super neat. But I remember the midwife saying, I don't think Sophie's coming for a while.
That's not a good feeling.
And I was like, are you serious? Because you're like super pregnant and just super annoyed. And like, you're just like, okay, it wasn't horrible though, because it wasn't like summer. It was December, you know? So like, it's not horrible. Okay. So my due date, keep in mind, was December 29th. Sophie decided to grace us with her presence on January 11th. So she was 2 weeks late.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, side note, my mom ended up switching her flight till January 15th. So she still did get to meet her and be there for the birth and stuff. And then she flew back a couple days after Sophie was born. But yeah, it was just so crazy. I remember just wanting the baby to be born so bad that I wanted it right then. Like I would have meltdowns like all the time. She has to come. This is horrible. And I remember just feeling so sorry for myself. But then my mom would say, but God has the perfect time for Sophie to be born. Like, you don't want it to come early. You don't want it to come late. Like, God is the perfect time. And I was like, okay. Sure. And I would like, and looking back, absolutely, he totally does. But in the moment when like you're super pregnant and you're just like, you're wanting your baby, of course, it's going to feel like a million years. So when I went to go see my midwife, me and Keith went. It was like a Sunday morning. My mom stayed with Ben and we went for my appointment. She was going to do a stretch and sweep, but she also was going to give me that midwife concoction stuff. So like, what do you call it? Castor oil and the almond butter and the I don't know, apricot
juice or something. Yeah.
It was disgusting. So she gave it to me. Oh, it was terrible. It was seriously so horrible. So I remember, oh yeah, and then they had that verbena oil, and it's funny because who was it? Like Health Canada, they banned it, and she's like, I already told you I was going to give it to you, so I'll just give it to you. And I was like, honestly, if you can get in trouble, don't even worry about it. I said, is it pretty, like, I don't know, effective without the oil? And she's like, oh yeah, it's good. Don't worry. I'm like, okay, let's just do that. So I didn't do the verbena oil. I just did that other stuff. And it started to make my contractions more strong, whatever. Then I just had annoying contractions for a whole day. Okay. Funny. It was kind of like I was in labor for probably a week before I had Sophie. And then after I had that stupid drink, I had horrible, painful contractions all day long. And then again, my body was able to rest. And then I remember Keith came upstairs and I wanted to kill him. I was so mad. And he had the drink in his hand, and he's like, here you go, bottoms up. And I'm like, and I had to take it again. And I was like gagging. And then I'm like, ugh! And then I ended up throwing up. Because I remember it was just so disgusting. I had to take it 3 times. Gross. So the first time, and then I had to take it 2 more times. It was so nasty. And I remember, oh, it was so gross. So then once I had that, it started to get more intense, but then it wasn't as intense as they wanted it. So they made me take it again. And I'm like, okay. Then it made my contractions really speed up. And then they actually were using, I don't know, like I still wasn't able to have the baby. It was the craziest thing. Like she just, like my contractions were just not doing what they were supposed to do. So then they gave me like that, I don't know, they did like acupressure. So they like stuck like little needles in my like pressure points, like on my feet, and like that kind of made it a little bit better, but like she just would not be born. And it makes sense after when I tell you what happened to me. I was really constipated my entire pregnancy, and like she had to get past a whole bunch of poop to come out. It's crazy. And it was horrible. It was like so painful. Imagine like being in labor and then cramps from constipation on top of that. It was horrible. And so I remember they were like, hey, we're gonna break your water and stuff. And I remember Keith being on one side of me and my mom on the other side of me. And I'm like kicking and screaming. And then that's when I vomited because it was just so intense. And so I bought the garbage can. I filled the entire garbage can. It was disgusting. And then I remember they broke my water, and then it just intensified from there. And so shortly after, I remember being in the pool, and still things weren't as like advanced as they were supposed to. And I remember sitting in the pool, and I was like so tired. I was falling asleep between contractions. I will never forget this. And it was like I don't know, it was like 10 o'clock that night, I guess. So I had labored all day. Like when she wrote down my active labor, she put like 12 hours. Like she doesn't even know how long it was. Like it was intense. And I remember my brother and sister-in-law had come and dropped Ben off. It was about 10:30 at night. And they were like, they stayed outside, and Keith just went to go get Ben and put him to sleep. And then I just labored in the pool a little bit more, but I was falling asleep because I was so tired, like literally passing out in between contractions because I was in labor for so long. Yeah. And I remember sitting in the pool, and my midwife was like, Jacqueline, like we can have the baby today, or we can like be pregnant another week. And I'm like, and she threatened me with a C-section. She's like, Jacqueline, like, we have to do this. Because she's like, you know what I can do? Like, if you sit a certain way, I didn't know you could do this, but she stuck her hand up there and moved my cervix. Like, she moved the last bit of my cervix. And she's like, as soon as I do that, the baby's head will drop down and you'll feel like you have to push. Yeah. So it was pretty crazy. I was straddling my husband, like he was on a chair, and I was like holding onto his arms. And I remember that happened, and then I ended up pooping on the floor.
I pooped in, I think, all of mine too. So
there is no dignity. Just check your dignity at the door, okay?
Yeah.
Like, it's just, it doesn't even matter. And like laboring naked, I'm like, I'll never be one of those people. I was so naked. I did not care.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. Like your brain just is a whole level of pain. Like you just don't. It's like a new level of pain.
Yeah.
You just don't care. And so I was totally that naked laborer. Anyways, so I was in the pool. Sorry, I pooped on the floor, and then I'm like, I need to push. And then I got in the pool. And then I remember pushing, and then she's like, oh, she had pooped, I think, in there. And so it was like coming out in the water, and she's like, I want you to stand up this time, and I want you to bear down and push. And so that's what I ended up doing. And she came out. within a couple pushes. I think I pushed a little bit longer, probably like 20 minutes. But I did not tear. I did not tear with Ben either. And it was just overall really good. But then when when the baby came out and I birthed the placenta, I hemorrhaged so bad. It was horrible. She's like freaking out, trying not to freak us out. But my husband's like he looked white as a ghost. And my mom was like, oh my goodness, is everything okay? And they immediately gave me a shot in my leg. I had 3 shots. So you can tell the difference in hemorrhaging with my son and her was 3.
Wow.
So I remember being so out of it, and they got me to sit down on my couch. I laid down and she gave me the shots in my leg, and then she hooked up an IV bag to my banister. And I was borderline needing a transfusion, but she told me that if I could walk from the living room to the bathroom, and if I didn't pass out, I wouldn't have to go to the hospital. So anyways, I just prayed, we just prayed, and I was able to get up and walk to the bathroom. I almost did faint, but I didn't. It got it was crazy. It was so weird. It was just I could see white, but I was still there. And then I remember being put on bed rest for the next, I don't know, it was 6 or 7 days. Yeah. So that one was kind of a doozy. I think it scared Keith. I always ask him, I'm like, is that why you didn't want a third? I don't know, because men are funny, right? But yeah, and then lo and behold, I didn't feel like we were done. I didn't feel after 2. I thought maybe, but then I was like, no, I think we're gonna have another one. So then my kids are actually quite spaced out, the last one. So my first are 21 months apart. And then we got pregnant with Lorelai. She and my daughter, there's about 5 years between them. So I basically begged my husband for a while to have another baby, and then finally he agreed to let us have another one. And my pregnancy was really good. I actually wasn't sick at all, but it was a huge blessing. But then, everything was good. I didn't have the same midwife because my midwife had moved away, so I was super bummed about that. But I was still with the same organization that I had before, and they're all amazing at Passages. I love them. If you're looking for a midwife in the Edmonton area, definitely seek out Passages in Stony Plain. They're amazing. Gosh, it's so funny. She's 18 months, but it's hard to remember because it was just it was so traumatizing, her birth.
It was a lot different than your others.
Oh my gosh. Talk about wild card for my third. So basically what happened, it's I was in labor for a while before and nothing really happened. And then I remember it was funny because my mother-in-law was like, don't have a baby while we're here this weekend because we were celebrating Christmas. And she had come over, her and my father-in-law had came to my house, and I had just woken up from a nap. And I remember Sophie was like, Mom, did you pee your pants? And I'm like, did I pee my pants? And then I looked rough. I told Keith, I said, I'll come down after my nap, but I am not doing anything with my hair. I look terrible. So anyways, I come down, my daughter notices, and then my husband's like, maybe your water broke. And I was like, oh no, baby, right? Just totally clicked in my head that there's baby coming. And I remember calling my midwife and being like, hey, I woke up from a nap and there was liquid on my pants and I don't know exactly what to do. Can you come and test it? Also, of course you forget things in every birth story. With my son, he was born dry because my water had been broken. My midwife suspects for a couple days. I don't know. It was broken for a while. He came out and he was really like dry. And so with Sophie, I made sure that I was very on it. Like if I had any fluid, I was like, is it amniotic fluid, you know? So with Lorelai, the same kind of thing. I was like really on it because I wanted to make sure that if it was, that I was doing the right thing. And so I remember I said, can you come over and test it? So she did. Midwives are amazing. And this is my third, and I should know what I'm doing. And I didn't know. And so she came over and she's like, okay, so you're probably not going to have any right now, but later you will. So just test it after. So I said, okay. So then that's what ended up happening. I ended up catching it on my leg, but I remember I was just having a conversation with Keith, and all of a sudden my water just started gushing. And I'm like, yep, that's definitely my water. And so then she's like, okay, well, then if it's your waters, which I suspect it is, we need to have this baby within the next 24 hours. And I said, okay. And she asked me what I was doing the next day. And I said, well, it's Christmas with his family, and I really want to go. I like wanted to go to church, and he's like, no, that's where I draw the line. Either we go to church, right? Either we draw, he said, I draw the line, we go to church, or we go to Christmas. And so I said, okay, we'll just go to Christmas. So then she wanted me to do that drink again. Oh, it's amazing. She's like, I'll just stop over at the market, the Italian market, and get that juice. And she brought all the ingredients for me. She was amazing. Wow. And so anyway, she gave me the drink. It was about, I don't know, 10:30 or 11 o'clock. And then we go to my brother-in-law's, and she just told me to like get up and walk around and like don't sit down. And so that's what I did. It got pretty intense. Like I want to say they were pretty close. They were becoming like 5 and 4 minutes apart. And so I told my husband, I said we should like go drive the kids to my girlfriend's house and then go home and meet the midwife at the house. So that's what we did. We get home and she checks me about an hour later, and I was about 3.5 centimeters. And we thought we were going to have a baby within a couple hours. Like we thought by like midnight we would have baby. But that is not what happened.
No.
It took me till midnight to get to 6 centimeters. And that's when she broke my water. And then I stayed at 6 centimeters all night long till 7 in the morning. And then she said, oh my goodness, Jacqueline, like I'm trying to get the baby's heart rate. It feels high, and so does yours. Like, I feel like we need to transfer. And I was freaking out because, like, remember, I wanted to be at home. Yeah. I labored in the pool a little bit too throughout the night. And like, I don't know what happened. My body just was like saying nope. And so I remember calling my mom and dad, and I'm crying and I'm having contractions, and they're so intense. Imagine 6 centimeter contractions for like 8 hours long. That's not supposed to last very long. It was horrible. I said, I want to die. Like, it was that bad. So I remember calling my mom and dad, and they're like praying with me. Like, I always call my mom when I don't feel good. And I'm 30, almost 5.
Nothing wrong with that.
No, but seriously, I always do. And Keith always laughs at me. There's that commercial, Pam, can you call my mom or something? I don't know. That's me. And so I remember I was in so much pain, and I just wanted to punch someone in the face. I had been vomiting because it was so intense. And then I remember Keith's like, hey, we're going. And I had no bag packed. So he's like packing my bag. Because I'm like, I'm not going. And then I remember getting in the car. It was about 7 o'clock in the morning. We got to the hospital around 7:45. We got into the ward or whatever for labor and delivery. We got there about 8 o'clock. They admitted me into a assessment room. And in that time, it's not that so we weren't just transferring to the hospital. By that point, we were actually being told that she was leaving to go home. So I was like, this cannot happen. Like, you cannot leave me. because I've never had a doctor. And she's like, Jacqueline, I'm just so sorry. Like, I feel like we need a new set of hands and blah, blah, blah. And I'm freaking out. Keith, the whole entire time, is praying, God, please help us. Let her fully dilate and let Kathleen deliver the baby. And so, anyways, I'm in triage. I'm like in triage, but I'm in like an assessment room and I'm freaking out. I'm jumping around like an ape. I'm not kidding. I'm screaming, get this effing baby out of me.
That would have been something to see.
Oh man, Petra, if you could have been a fly on the wall, you would have been laughing so hard.
I bet.
I was like psycho, like it's crazy. So then I remember being in so much pain, and then the doctor coming in being like, I'm gonna be your doctor, and like I'm like, no you're not. And then my midwife was like, Jacqueline, it's okay, blah blah blah. And then he comes in, he's like, what can I get you? And I'm like, I want the drugs. And like, really, I didn't want the drugs. I wanted her out. Like, well, I didn't even know what I was having at that point, but I wanted her out. And so then my husband's like, oh my God, I don't know this lady. Just kidding. So then I remember him just looking at me, and then all of a sudden my contractions got so intense. Oh, by the way, he is amazing. He like gave me like intense massages like in my back, like every single time. They were so intense because I couldn't make it through. Like I seriously could not have made it through. And so then it was crazy because all of a sudden my contractions, they just changed and they got so intense, and they already were so intense, but they just like kicked into high gear. And I'm like, I've never felt this pain in my entire life. Like I'm going to die. And so I look at my midwife and I'm like, I feel the baby's butt. I feel, what did I say? I just screamed. I can feel the baby coming out of my butt or something. I don't know what I said. And I like yelled it. And she's like freaking out. She's like, these contractions look so different. Like, can I check? And I'm like dying at this point. And Keith's like, honey, can she just check? I'm like, yes, check. So she checked and her head was like right there. So then within seconds, they had me on the stretcher. That was so intense when a baby's coming out of you and you're literally in transition and you have to lay on your back. I don't recommend it. So anyways, they pushed me on the bed and I was so stubborn, you guys. I didn't even put a gown on because I was like, I don't want to be here, blah, 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 blah. Oh, by the way, also, right before I said I feel the baby in my butt, she said to me she was doing up her jacket to leave. Can you imagine? I was just like, no. So then when she's like, oh, change of plans, I'm going to deliver the baby, I was so relieved. And so, yeah, we got into the labor and delivery room and they pushed me on the bed and I literally ripped my pants off and the baby's head was right there and it was already like sticking out. It was the most intense thing ever. And then, they gave me laughing gas, but I was like so out of it. I just took the gas and I went, I was biting it. I was biting on the end and I was like, ah! It was crazy. And Keith's like, oh my gosh. And then I just started to bear down and I just started to push. And then I remember the midwife being like, Keith, do you want to catch? And he's like, of course I do. I caught all my other babies and I want to catch this baby too. And so, yeah, he was right in there and he caught the baby and then put her on my chest. It turned me over on my back and then he said, it's a girl. And then we both started bawling. And it was, ever since then, it was really good after that. I didn't hemorrhage. Praise the Lord. That's one thing I prayed, and Petra prayed that with me, that I would not hemorrhage, and I did not hemorrhage. And I'm so grateful. And like postpartum was so easy breezy. Like I had a light period for a week, and then that was it.
I think we'll have to have some guests on the show who've different birth experiences, like wanting to be in the hospital and C-sections and medicated births, right? Because although our births were different, we both had similar like birth plans that we wanted.
Yeah, totally.
Well, thank you everyone for listening to our birth stories. Hopefully you learned something.
This one was a little long.
Yeah, a little longer than our other podcasts are going to be, but we had a lot to cover.
We definitely did. And yeah, it was fun sharing, and thanks for being with us.